Coming up on Chasing the Natty, with the release of the 2024 CFF Guide from Campus of Canton, we're going to dive into the team profiles and talk about 10 offenses that we think are being underrated and underdiscussed in the CFF community. We'll analyze what makes those offenses so intriguing, if there are any potential hidden gems to be found later in your drafts, and so much more. We've got all of that and more coming right after this.
To go, breaks a tackle, he's 10, he's touchdown! Cook's gonna throw the deep ball, and Burton caught the defense! Touchdown, Luther Burton! Milrow gonna run it again, got a lane, kicked in the turbo, Milrow! Goodbye, touchdown Bama!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, welcome in everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning again. We are the College Fantasy Football Podcast on the Campus of Canton Podcast Network. You can find us on all of your podcast feeds and on YouTube every Monday morning during the off season at 6 a.m. sharp. If you want to support the great work we are doing here, head on over to campuscanton.com. Subscribe there with one of our phenomenal tiers. You have content ranging on all sorts of college football games, whether it's CFF, Devy, C2C, College IDP, College DFS. Really, if you play it, we've got content, whether that's tools, rankings, podcasts, pretty much everything you need to succeed. If you want to get in touch for whatever reason, you can find me in the show on Twitter. I'm at CFF_Jared. The show is at Chasing the Natty, and our wonderful, handsome, well-groomed guest today is Mr. Chris Moxley at Chris Moxley19 on Twitter. Mox, welcome back to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I don't think I've been on in a long time. I was trying to think if it was last time we did this show was the last time I was on, but I feel like I've been on since then. Maybe I just don't remember.
I feel like we did one earlier this offseason. I could have sworn you've been on.
Maybe.
I
don't know. Either way, I'm happy to be back.
Right. Regardless, it's always great to have you back on, man. It's been an exciting week for us here at Campus of Canton, as well as just the CFF community in general. We released our CFF guide, which you guys can now go check out, $20 on the Campus of Canton website. It came out last week, so
a week ago.
Make sure you go and get that for all of your leagues. It's a labor of love between myself, Chris Moxley, Nate Marquise, Ethan Sowers, Chris K., Justice, who provided us all of the defensive analysis we included this year, and then obviously Dwight Peoples, who did all of the editing for it. It is really, in my opinion, the most complete guide that you can get out there, and for only $20, in my opinion, it's just an absolute steal compared to what it offers and everything like that. But in addition to that, Chris Moxley, we should probably talk about the exciting kind of surprise announcement. Not really an announcement because they haven't really said anything official yet, but Josh Chevy kind of lit everything on fire the other day when he put out a tweet noticing that Underdog looks like they're about to start offering college fantasy best balls going forward. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what their product offering is, if it's actually best ball or it's some sort of weekly contest or like daily contests or so something of that. They already have like you can do over-unders on there during the season. So they started dipping their toes into the college waters a little bit, but any sort of expansion, including best ball, would just blow the doors wide open in terms of accessibility to college fantasy in general. I think that's the prospect is extremely exciting. I'll put it that way.
I definitely agree because Fantrax is great. But a lot of people know Fantrax because they've looked up more niche forms of fantasy, right? Because that's what the Fantrax is very good about, right? They offer college fantasy. They offer MLS fantasy, golf fantasy, NCAA basketball fantasy, and stuff like that, right? But if you're just playing NFL, you're playing on Sleeper, you're playing on My Fantasy League, or if you're doing best balls, you go to Underdog. Underdog, for a lot of people, has become like the best ball spot to go to. And so if a place like Underdog starts offering college fantasy, that kind of puts it in front of the eyeballs of a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be looking for it. So I think that should I agree with you. That should absolutely blow some things wide open for the popularity of CFF moving forward. And with that, we are putting together our official Campus Canton best ball rankings, Mox. So you want to tell the people a little bit about those?
Yeah, it's something that I think conceptually I've been working on for a while in terms of when you see rankings, and our site is this way and a lot of sites are this way, they're by position. And it gives you a good idea of where players should be valued relative to their same position. This ranking set that we're putting together, and if you're listening to this on a Monday, it's probably out already. If it's not, it's coming real soon. It is all the combined positions, and I got a couple formulas in there to create value and how it's done. But I'm really excited for this. I think it's a really big step forward that we're taking to improve the draft experience and rankings overall, especially in best balls. That's what a lot of people are doing. It's easy. You can do it quickly. It takes less management. So yeah, I'm really excited to get this together. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention all the work that Jarek has done on it as well to kind of create a quick turnaround. Because when we heard about this potential release on Underdog, and we don't know exactly what it is, but the fact that it's even being on a best ball platform, we said, we really need these. So very excited to get these out. And, a lot. I didn't just come up with these rankings, right? The CFF team over time and y'all, like there's a lot that has gone into these and how they're calculated and formulated. So I don't want to take all the credit because there has been a lot of work from a lot of different people.
Yeah, no, from what I gather, you guys put together a ton of work into those formulas to kind of really spit out what, in my opinion, is a great way to look at like all the positions combined together and really kind of makes a go-to place for anybody hopping into college fantasy for the first time that may see it on Underdog. They just search best ball rankings. Boom, there you go. It's basically a draft board made for you from what I've seen already. It is really, really incredible stuff. And might I add, shout out to Jarek on the aesthetics of it. It looks fantastic. And I already told him that I want the rest of the rankings on the website to look like this going forward because it just looks super, super nice. But enough of all that, Mox. We got a great show ahead of us here today. I think we've done this 3 years in a row. I think I bring you on every offseason to discuss some underrated offenses because, Mox, that's where I think one of your bread and butters is, man. You love to dive into the weaves, especially on smaller schools, finding out about these offenses that really kind of fly under the radar a little bit throughout the offseason, right? Against 134 teams out there. There's going to be teams that, just don't come up in conversation that much. And last couple of years, we have pointed out several great offenses that have flown under the radar that ended up being huge for CFF. Like last year, we talked about South Florida. That was a really big one, right? So we're going to do that again this year. We got 10 teams here. I think we got two Power 5 teams, or excuse me, Power 4 teams, one independent team, and then 7 G5 teams here. So Moxley, I'll ask you, when you're kind of looking for these underrated offenses, like what are you kind of looking for?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with scheme more than anything. More than players, to be totally honest. I think if you run a good enough scheme, you can fit almost any player into it. Mm-hmm. So that's the number one thing. And so when I'm looking at scheme, I'm looking at tempo is really important to me. Pace means you get more plays on offense. So like in general, more plays means more opportunity to score fantasy points. It's not really a lot more complicated than that idea. And it's something that we include in our CFF guide too, because I think it's really important to understand what offenses are producing the most plays, producing the most yards, etc. So like those things generally go hand in hand. I think it's pretty easy to latch onto offenses as well that are very pass heavy. So when we look at neutral game script pass rate and that generally it's taking when the game is in hand, what exactly are offenses wanting to do? Mm-hmm. So right, late in the game, you're down 10 points, you're throwing all the time, right? That you might not be doing that in the early second quarter when it's tied 7-7. So we're trying to tell you what the offense fundamentally wants to look like. And I tend to gravitate to those that have a high heavy pass rate. Just kind of lifts the entire offense in a lot of cases, and some of them that are very heavy pass rates. Also have good rushing game because they're dropping back like a ton of the DBs. They're playing further from the line of scrimmage, et cetera. So it generally lifts the entire offense. So those are really the big numbers that I look at more than anything.
Let me ask you, Mox. I'm looking at a couple of the teams we'll be talking about here today, and for lack of better terms, we're looking at some offenses here today that were just straight horrific last year, right? At least in scheme and everything like that. Some of them is like they're bringing new coaches and stuff like that, so you would expect an increase there. But like for some of these teams that we're looking at, where there's not really a huge change in personnel, not really a huge change in the players and everything, what are some things you look for that might indicate that a team is going to do better than they did the year before?
Yeah, and you say that, and I think I'm probably guilty of that on a lot of the teams that I looked at. I was like, okay, I think they can take that second year jump. And that's usually what a lot of it is. It's usually a coach in their second year who now they've installed their scheme. Now they've installed or brought in the personnel that they like. They don't have the entire old staff's players, for example. So I think that year 2 jump is something that I try to target. If someone's really bad, a lot of it is implementing scheme. Mm-hmm. It really is. So, and one of the teams we're going to talk about today is a really, really good example of this, because what a team generally hires after a certain coach is like the exact opposite. So the players aren't really made for that scheme in general when the new staff comes in. So it takes time to learn. It takes time to get the personnel in. It takes at least a year, sometimes 2. And so I'm looking at those types of situations saying, okay, this is a way different team than it was 2 years ago. Can they be better 12, 18 months after the hire? So I like to find those second-year coaches or third-year coaches that I think are just on the verge of breaking out.
I think a couple of good examples the last couple of years would be Georgia Southern and the hire of Clay Helton. Obviously, the first year they were there, I mean, Van Treese was pretty solid, but for the most part, you could tell they weren't even still fully running that air raid system that he wanted to run over there. And then Hawaii, right? Their first year, they just didn't even try to implement the run and shoot offense over there. They fully admitted that after the year, saying, like, we just didn't have the players we wanted to get that up and running. And now, obviously, they looked a lot better last year. I mean, Pafele Ashlock and Stephen McBride now going in the top 5 rounds of every draft that we have right now. So I think it's an excellent point there, Mox. I just had a point that I wanted to bring up, and now it's completely escaping me. Oh well, I'm sure I'll think of it at some point during the show. Let's go ahead, and I think, Mox, we'll go ahead and get into some of these teams we'll talk about here today. But before we get to that, I'll throw out a few announcements here. I already mentioned the CFF guide. It is out. All 134 teams are covered in it. We got 200 plus player profiles from 6 different college fantasy writers, tons of different perspectives, tons of great analysis, lots of great stuff. One of my favorite things is going through different team profiles, different player profiles, and starting to note different stats, different things that different analysts look at. And obviously, with all of us being different types of analysts, you can then kind of take it on your own and say, like, oh, I noticed that Moxley talks about the offensive pace a lot, but there's a lot of teams where that's not brought up. Maybe I do my own research and figure out, like, oh, does that same point that Moxley made over here for the Tennessee Volunteers apply over here to South Florida? Who knows? Maybe it does. Again, tons of ways to really kind of go through and look at it and analyze it. It's literally hours and hours and hours of reading and analysis that you could dive into and do tons of fun stuff on your own. Again, lots of other stuff in there. Again, ADP, simple mock drafts are in there. Got schedule analysis divided into Power 4 and G5, hardest and easiest schedules. Again, this year, we're adding a ton of great stuff like projections to the player profile. So every player that has a profile in there, you will see what their projected stat line is supposed to be. Thank you to Nick Allen and the C2C Winning Edge statistical projections for providing those. We also have an awesome section now dedicated to defense. There's tons of stats in there regarding the different defenses of all the teams, as well as a weekly streaming guide for those of you that do play in leagues where you are required to handle that kind of thing, because it'll basically allow you to kind of get ahead of the curve multiple weeks in advance. That way you're not scrambling every other week in terms of which defense you should be trying to pick up. So
I loved that addition, by the way. That's pretty cool. I definitely get a lot of use out of that.
Oh yeah, Justice did an absolutely fantastic job on that. So make sure you go check that out. In addition, make sure you go check out the latest episode of Defending the Natty. Myself, Nate Marquise, Josh Chevalier, and Eric Froton did a 3-round freshman and supplemental draft. It was an absolute blast. Be on the lookout for the next episode of Defending the Natty. Should be coming out here in the next couple of days. Normally released on the 15th, but we are going to have to postpone that just a couple of days, mostly because unfortunately my weekend just got way too busy. So y'all be patient with us on that. We'll have it to you as soon as we can. In addition to that, make sure you check out our weekly CFF Draft live streams on YouTube every Sunday night. We have been having an absolute blast with those. We've had a ton of great guests on this year. We've been trying to vary up the type of draft. So we did, again, a Power 4 only, G5 only draft. We did a 6-point passing touchdown league. This week, if you're listening to this on Monday, make sure you go check out the latest one on our YouTube channel. I bring on Tyler Budge from @CFBudge on Twitter and YouTube. We had an absolute great time, so make sure you go and check that out. All that being said, Mox, I've done enough spieling here. I think we should go ahead and start talking about some of these underrated and under-discussed offenses. And the first one I'm going to bring up here is going to be the Mississippi State Bulldogs. This is obviously a team that got absolutely just ransacked basically last year, right? You're talking after the season, right? Zach Arnett, 1-year head coach, clearly wasn't working out. And with his departure, we see pretty much the entire team go as well. We're talking about a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of returning production at 10.2% here, according to our CFF guide here. It's a mess, right? The entire team has been completely overhauled. You, at quarterback, you bring in Blake Shapen from Baylor. At running back, we basically have almost nobody coming back except for maybe Jeffrey Pittman and Seth Davis. But Seth Davis is injured, so it's a kind of up in the air in terms of how much he will be playing this year. They also bring back Kevon Lee at running back, but wide receivers almost seeing an entire overhaul here, right? Their top 2 wide receivers, it looks like going into this year, are Kelly Akari and Kevin Coleman, one transferring in from UTEP, the other one transferring in from Louisville. And then they got a couple of interesting tight ends here with Seydou Traore, who was a beast at Arkansas State a couple of years ago. Obviously didn't do anything last year. And then Vanderbilt transfer Justin Ball. Pretty much almost anybody on this team we're talking about is a transfer, which, Mox, this is, I told you it was going to come up as soon as as soon as we started talking about it. The question I wanted to ask you, because you brought up the 2-year, like that year 2 coach, right? Does that change more now with the transfer portal? Do you think we're going to see more coaches like Jeff Lebby here at Mississippi State kind of get their offenses up and running earlier because they can get the personnel in from the transfer portal? Yep.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because you also are bringing in a lot of new bodies who have to learn a new system in general. So I think it will expedite the process some because you can handpick guys who have played in a similar role or similar system. Like, I think that's kind of what we were going for here, especially with the addition of Kevin Coleman. I think that like makes sense for what Levy's trying to do. But overall, I'm not sure how. Maybe it speeds it up a little bit, but I wouldn't say I'm overly confident. Like, a lot of transfers is still a lot of transfers, which is concerning.
No, for sure, right? But again, part of what makes it difficult to get things up and running in year 1, as you kind of mentioned earlier, was the fact that you don't have the guys that you recruited on the team yet versus now with the transfer portal. I mean, these are guys you recruited. That is part of the coaching staff. It's not like you inherited those transfers. But no, you make good points, right? Again, you're still having to implement people that didn't play in your system before, unless you are a coach, and we'll talk about this later with one of the G5 teams we'll talk about, unless you are bringing up guys from your former spot that, you know, have worked with you before, and that'll definitely make things a lot easier to get up and running in year 1. Again, to me, it's like we know Jeff Lebby's offense has been great over the years, right? Again, back at his time at UCF, then going to Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, then immediately from there going to Oklahoma. His offense has been great and up and running really in year 1, every stop that he is going. And based on what we saw in the spring game, it looks like Blake Shapen and Kelly Akari and Kevin Coleman look like they're going to be the backbone of this offense. And given that there's just almost no depth at running back, wide receiver, this screams like a potential offense that is going to have highly concentrated targets to their top guys. The running back room, I'm still trying to figure out how I really view this, because a shallow running back room can make for two things to happen, really. One, they rely on only one guy because he's the only back that works. Or two, they're kind of forced into a committee no matter how good that top guy is, because they cannot risk losing that top guy and giving him 30 carries a game. So I'm not really sure what to do with the running back room, but guys like Shapen, Akari, Coleman, the game script's going to be here for them to be passing a ton, because this defense also is just completely ripped to hell and back in terms of what they bring back. I'm shocked that guys like Shapen, Akari, Kevin Coleman are all going round 18 plus. I feel like that I really thought we would see them kind of rise as the offseason went along, as people kind of dove into these teams a little bit more, especially after that fantastic spring game that they had. What do you think, Mox?
Yeah, so Mississippi State is probably the toughest team, one of the toughest teams in the country for me to really figure out. It's just been like a hellacious 18 months for the entire program after Coach Leach passed. So last year, obviously, was a disaster. Zach Arnett was clearly not ready to be head coach. I mean, the offense ranked 127th success rate, and like even worse when you look at some of the advanced numbers like EPA per play, they were 116th. It was bad offense, really, really bad. It's also a huge turnaround based on what they were doing last year. So I honestly don't know. I like Kelly Akari. I think he's a good player. It's like you could sell me on him pretty easily, because I do think he's going to command a significant share of targets in this offense. Coleman, I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to see Coleman like really be a breakout stud that I think he could have been.
He definitely feels like the fetch, the fetch wide receiver of the year. Where it's like, stop trying to make Kevin Coleman happen.
That's my thought on him. But I like Seydou Traore here too. Like I think he could be a big piece in this offense. I know we didn't see him last year, but I think that was there was a lot not football related per se that like I think led to him not being on the field all that much.
Mm-hmm. I was just about to ask about the tight ends. Obviously, Traore being one of those kind of wide receiver tight end hybrids, we love to see. Make some great receiving threats down the field. But they, like I mentioned before, they also bring in Justin Ball, the tight end out of Vanderbilt, who scored 3 touchdowns in that spring game early this offseason. Now, obviously, that brings up memories of Michael Trigg. But at the same time,
I was gonna say it.
But at the same time, like, you know, as I mentioned, there's just no real receiving depth out there. So maybe it could be that Ball and Traore are receiving options 3 and 4 on this team, just because they don't really have anybody else. Oh yeah, they got Creed Whittemore still as well, so I can't undersell him too much, but still.
I did a legit double take when I saw that Jaden Wally was still on the team. Dude, just transfer, man.
I've never seen somebody lose spots on the depth chart every single year that he is there.
It's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. This is a really tough team for me. Like, just to be honest, I have no idea which direction they're going to go. I think it could be bad. It's not going to be 19.5 points per game bad, but I don't know if it's going to be like 28 points per game. Mm-hmm. Like that's like, do they get to average, or are they still going to be the bottom quartile? And I don't know if I know the answer to that.
I think in my mind, there's two things that kind of go for and against the idea of Mississippi State being a super underrated offense right now. One, I do think that Jeff Lebby's basically his recruiting pitch is like moving forward is get butts and seats for Mississippi State, make an exciting offense that people want to watch, make an exciting offense that like highly ranked offensive players are going to want to come play for, right? Like that's going to be his goal. It's been his goal pretty much everywhere that he has gone. And so I can see him trying to force feed and basically force his team to get to 35 points a game. Now, I don't think we'll actually get there, but even so, I think that could be his goal every week, is just try to put up as many points as possible. Absolutely, I think we could see him try to run up the score on some of the smaller teams that they face. But the other problem is that Mississippi State has the 15th hardest schedule in the Power 4, according to our numbers from C2C Winning Edge. And that's going to make getting to that 35 number quite a bit harder when he's having to do that in the SEC week after week. And Mississippi State will be one of the lesser SEC teams this year.
Yeah, I mean, they probably have 2 games where I feel really good about. 3 games where I feel really good about them winning. 4 probably, but outside of that, like they're playing really tough. It's a tough schedule. It really is. I mean, Georgia, A&M, they do get Arkansas. They do avoid Alabama. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It's not an easy schedule, like you said. It's pretty tough.
All right, let's move on to the second team here. Chris, this is our second Power 4 team of the day. You specifically put this down as a team you wanted to bring up, and they are epitome of one of those year 2 teams here. We're talking about the Stanford Cardinal here. A couple of interesting guys going in drafts right now. Ashton Daniels, QB 58 in ADP, mid to early 24th round. Cedric Irvin Jr., the running back there, RB 84 in ADP, going around the early 23rd round. Obviously, CFF players are no stranger to Alec Iomenor, who's going in the mid to early 5th round, wide receiver 19, but also, Tiger Bachmeier still around. And then also Sam Roosh, the expected tight end to take over for Benjamin Urasek there, going as tight end 23 in drafts, mid to early 21st round. So Moxley, what do you like so much about Stanford? Again, we're talking about a team here that I'm looking at it. They were 97th in offensive points per game last year, averaging 20.7 points here. What do you think is going to make them have that big jump this year? And do you think guys like Daniels, Irvin, Bachmeier, Roosh, all those guys are going too late?
So this is a really good example of coach comes in with a brand new scheme, way different than the previous one. What David Shaw was running and what Troy Taylor run are like almost couldn't be more different. It's not, I mean, Shaw wasn't running the triple option, but there's a lot of power running in that offense. So we saw the script get like totally flipped last year, right? They were 8th in neutral game script pass rate. Here's the cool part. They returned 90% of their production of offense. 90%. They're close to the top in the country in returning production. That tells me these players have familiarity with the scheme and they stuck around. So there's something happening here at Stanford, I think, that's building. And when we saw Troy Taylor last have a productive offense, coaching where he was at Sacramento State, we saw running back Cameron Scadabo go for 1,753 total yards. A lot of yardage. Quarterback play was excellent. Dual threat, exactly what Taylor looks to run his offense through. Biggest question is going to be, for me at least, can the offensive line take a step? Because they were 131st in line yards last year. It was not a good offensive line. They returned 4 starters. The unit was pretty inexperienced in 2023. Can they make that jump? I think they can. I don't know. There's a lot of things to like about this offense. Like, I think Amenor is really good. I think Cedric Irvin is really good. I think Ash Daniels can take another step. Like, I think year 2 of this offense is going to be a lot better than year 1. That's my I really truly think we could see a Stanford team that like moves to the middle of production versus like the bottom 25.
Let me ask you, Mox, this is a thought that I had when I was kind of researching Stanford here for the show today. Iomenor was just phenomenal down the stretch, right? Like had multiple games of 12 plus targets. But my concern a little bit is like nothing else on offense was really working last year outside of Iomenor at times. If this offense does kind of gel a little bit more, should people drafting Iomenor in that 5th round be a bit more concerned that he may not see that same target share that he was getting last year?
So, not for me.
39.9% was his target share.
I just think he's far and away the best skill position player on this team. Like, I just think he's that good. And I like Tiger Bachmeier too. He was a true freshman last year, so there's always room for him to improve and whatnot. But I just think Amenor is a crazy good player. Size, speed, athleticism on the outside. Like he can pretty much be any corner 1-on-1 that he wants in the ACC. Not every corner, but a lot of them. The bigger question for me is what happens with Cedric Irvin, because Cedric Irvin was a true freshman last year. Mm-hmm. Does he take a jump in his second year? I don't know. And I feel like the same thing with Tiger Bachmeier. Also, how screwed did Hank get when his 2 younger brothers are Tiger and Bear?
I know, right?
Just I'm just saying.
Wasn't Hank's the oldest one, right? Though, so like the
Yeah.
parents probably didn't figure out that naming scheme until later. But
Yeah,
still,
right.
I feel like
Lion
if my name was Hank, and my brothers were Bear and Tiger, I probably would have just asked for a name change at some point.
Yeah, I think that's kind of unfair to Hank, but either way, yeah. I mean, I like Sam Roche. Is it Roosh or Roush? I'm not
I think it's
totally
Roosh.
sure how you pronounce it. Okay, Roosh. I liked him as a recruit a lot too. I thought he took some pretty big steps last year. I think he could be a productive player in this offense. I don't know. I just think it's gonna be better overall, which means there's probably more yardage to go around, and like the pie is bigger. Even if we think Amanor is going to get his, I still think the secondary options are interesting. I mean, we saw the running back have over 40 catches, Scatabo in 2022.
Yep.
So and Irvin is a good pass catcher too, which is why I've been drafting him a lot in the.
Oh yeah, he's absolutely some
8 rounds.
No, he's absolutely been somebody that I've been taking in the round 20 plus range a ton of as well. Like, again, Chris K just put out a recent article talking about like you should have like 8 out of your 10 running backs by the time you get to like round 20. Irvin has absolutely been one of those guys that once I get to round 20 plus, I just need 1 or 2 extra running backs. I got to take the shot here because, as you mentioned, Mox, like if he can even get half of what Cameron Scatabo got in his year under Troy Taylor, then like has still a pretty decent CFF running back most weeks. And so like I think Irving is absolutely a hugely undervalued guy right now. Roche I like a lot. I've taken a shot on him because he's probably one of the better later round tight ends that I've seen. I'm still not fully bought in on Ashton Daniels. Again, obviously they've said that he's taken some pretty big steps this year. But I don't know. I do like Elijah Brown quite a bit, so maybe that's just my bias on that part coming in.
I like Elijah Brown too. For what it's worth. So Stanford is a team that I'm buying this year, and it's a team that I'm buying long term. I think Troy Taylor is like the absolute perfect guy to lead this program. I think things are trending really well, and this is a little bit in the weeds, but it's really important. In June, they changed their graduate policy in terms of in terms of transfers. So they don't have to enroll in a graduate program. They can opt for a post-baccalaureate studies. And so that getting into Stanford's grad school as a football player, probably as anybody really, like I could get into Stanford's grad school. Getting to Stanford's grad school is tough, period. And they don't play ball with the athletics department. Now they don't have to be enrolled in a graduate program, which is a big distinction, which means they can take transfers now. They're not going to take like 30 transfers, but that getting like 10 or 12 kids in is so much different, considering I think they've only added one, like prior to this year, they only added one transfer, like since the portal really opened up. And it was a believe an Oklahoma player who got accepted into their graduate program and happened to be a football player. It was not the other way around. So I don't know. I really, really do think long term this team is gonna be a lot better than we've seen the last couple of years.
And Stanford's not really a program that has to go into the transfer portal a ton, right? Like you mentioned earlier, they returned a crap ton of their production from last year. And a lot of that has to do with what Stanford is as a school, right? If you're going to Stanford as a football player, you go with it in the back of your mind that like I'm using my athletics as an opportunity to get a scholarship at one of the best schools in America. That's not something that a lot of those college players are going to want to give up so easily. So they don't really have to have, they don't have to bring in 10, 12 transfers every offseason in order to kind of make up the lost scholarships from the transfer portal every offseason. So I think I agree with you, Mox. Like they can afford to be picky and choosy with the guys that they get going forward to be perfect fits for their system.
Yeah, and they're not going to overwhelm the portal. And you know what? They're probably not paying their players. If they're paying their players, they're probably not paying them a lot, and they probably never will.
I don't know the school.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know the financial or like NIL opportunities at Stanford. I probably should look before the show, but I guarantee it's not. If there's any, it's not a lot. So that like they'll probably never compete with money either. So there is like the path forward for Stanford is narrow, but I do think they have the right guy in Troy Taylor to lead the program.
All righty, let's move on to our next school here. Again, we're going independent here. I really want to talk about Notre Dame. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Really, the big story here with Notre Dame this offseason is them managing to, in my opinion, make one of the best offensive coordinator hires of the entire offseason. That was bringing in Mike Denbrock back to Notre Dame here. Hopefully, this means we're going to see a pretty massive upgrade in this offense in a huge way. The offense for LSU last year obviously was just so crazy. Like, we're talking about number 1 in the country in points per game. If they didn't have that atrocious defense, you were talking about a team that could have challenged for a national championship because they could just put up points on literally anybody that they came across. That's just how good their offense was. Obviously, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, we talked about QB1 and QB1 and wide receiver 1 in all of fantasy last year. Brian Thomas was a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. So he's being brought back to Notre Dame here. And Notre Dame, outside of Audric Estime last year, their offensive prospects for CFF have not been the most glamorous that we've seen, outside of obviously, Michael Meyer and the tight end position, really. So with him coming back to Notre Dame, I really want to kind of take a little bit deeper dive into what we can expect out of this offense this year. Because I don't think, even Mike Denbrock coming back, I don't think they're going to jump up and be like the number 1 offense in the country this year. I don't think that's really even what Marcus Freeman wants, but he wants a competent offense here. And they've got the pieces, really, I think, here to be a much better offense this year. They bring in Briley Leonard, obviously, from Duke. He's going QB 33 in drafts, right there in the middle of the 15th round. Our projections from C2C Winning Edge have him at 340.5 fantasy points for this year. That would be QB7 in college fantasy last year. So really, if it weren't for the fact that Riley Leonard was dealing with injury after injury and surgery after surgery this offseason, he'd probably be going much higher in drafts. But the thing that really kind of blows me away is, again, we saw Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas have absolutely outstanding performances at wide receiver last year. And we're hardly seeing any of these Notre Dame wide receivers have shots taken at them in drafts. I mean, the best one we got here is Chris Mitchell, the FIU transfer coming in. Wide receiver 82 in drafts, going around mid to late 22nd round. Jaden Greathouse, who people loved last year as a true freshman going into the season, he's being drafted as wide receiver 119, mid to early 29th round. And then Jaden Thomas, who was expected to be the wide receiver 1 last year before he got hurt, is just straight up going undrafted. So I'm very much surprised that nobody's taking the shots here, given what we just saw of this offense last year. And then obviously Mitchell Evans is around tight end 21 in drafts. But with his injuries, people are kind of backing off on him a little bit. But I'm kind of surprised we're not seeing people then come back for Eli Raridan. Because if you think that Mitchell Evans isn't going to play, I would have to think you would go after a guy like Eli Raridan, who was a former 4-star tight end there. I don't know. It feels like there's definitely some opportunity in this offense. And I haven't even mentioned the running back situation. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are both going right next to each other in drafts, RB 75 and 76. Both of them right there, right at the tail end of the 19th, 20th round, depending on what drafts you're kind of looking at there. I don't know. I'm feeling like there's definitely some opportunity. If Mike Denbrock can take what he learned at LSU in that final year and apply it here, we could be in for a pretty major jump in Notre Dame's offense this year. Moxley, what do you think?
Okay, so I understand what you are saying, but I do have to. It would be remiss if I did not point out that they were 11th in point per game, 9th in yards per play, 17th in points per drive, 18th in yards per pass, 13th in success rate, 11th in EPA per play. Like, this offense was really good last year.
It was phenomenal.
It just didn't produce for fantasy. And
you mean Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were talking about LSU's. My bad.
Oh, no, sorry. So that's really good. It's just we didn't get fantasy production. And we did. It was at the running back position. But the passing game was still good. I mean, they top 20 yards per pass, so they were creating explosives. I am going to push back because I don't like Riley Leonard. I am concerned not only with the injury, but because I don't think that he's a very good passer. And I'm actually pretty interested to see what he does in this system versus what he did in the Kevin John system, because John's system is also very quarterback friendly. Like he basically kept producing, regardless of where he was, would produce good quarterback play. And I think Denbrock is, I was wrong about Denbrock. I dunked on him when Chip Kelly brought him, or not Chip Kelly.
Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly brought him. But he's proved me wrong. But it also took a year for Jane Daniels to like fit into the system. Is that going to happen with Riley Leonard? I don't know. So I am a little skeptical. I think the player that I want on this team more than anybody is Chris Mitchell. I just think he's by far the best wide receiver. I don't think Jaden Greyhouse is very good. I hope Jaden Greyhouse doesn't listen to this show. I just don't think he's a very talented wide receiver. I don't really think much of Jaden Thomas. I think the wide receiver 2 in this team might be Bo Collins out of Clemson. Like I think he might be the guy. And I think I have more interest in him than I do the other two, the aforementioned 2. But yeah, I don't know. Again, Riley Leonard concerns me because he concerned me at Duke too. Like I just don't think he's a very good passer of the football. He's a crazy rusher.
Let me ask you then, Mox.
Yes.
Like, Riley Leonard, obviously, he's had some health issues this offseason. It's to be determined what he looks like in the fall camp. They say he should be good to go, but we've heard that song and dance before with different quarterbacks, right? Steve Angeli's our backup quarterback right now. If Steve Angeli's rolled out there week 1, how are you feeling about this offense if that's the case? Or how does that change your opinion of this offense?
I don't know. I don't really like Steve Angeli either. I watched the spring game and I thought all the quarterbacks played pretty well, to be totally honest. I thought Minchie played really well. I'd like to see him get a shot if Riley Leonard can't go. And CJ Carr, I thought looked good too. It's like, I actually think the quarterback depth in Notre Dame is pretty good. I don't know how I feel about Steve Angeli, but he certainly does have the most experience behind Leonard. So I assume he'd be the guy. But they have 3 quarterbacks that I think could step in and be pretty okay. Even though Carr is a freshman, right? Like he looked good in the spring game. And I didn't even like him that much as a recruit. So I think that the floor for the offense and the floor for the quarterback position is fairly high. I just don't know that the ceiling is there. That's more of my concern.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to our next team here. Now we're going to go deep diving into Mox's favorite place to be, and that is the group of 5. And we'll start off with San Diego State here. I could hear some people rolling their eyes because it feels like we talked about San Diego State quite a bit recently. And I will say we'll kind of skim over AJ Duffy, being the quarterback there, although we probably would be remiss if we didn't mention the true freshman quarterback, Danny O'Neal there. But Mox, we actually recently got a depth chart from San Diego State during their media days, and it is kind of creating a little bit of stir in terms of what kind of assumptions we made about this offense so far this year. So I'll kind of let you take away here and start talking about San Diego State and Sean Lewis year 1.
Yeah, we know what Sean Lewis is. Like, I don't think I really need to gush over his credentials. Really productive offenses at Kent State. Really productive 8 games at Colorado before he was unfairly demoted. We know where he goes, he produces good offense. And I don't think San Diego State's going to be any different. This year is probably the bigger question. Will it happen now or will it happen year 2, year 3? Quarterback position. We've talked a lot about AJ Duffy. You've talked a lot about AJ Duffy on the show. I'm not totally convinced that he's the guy. I think he'll start week 1, but I think that Danny O'Neal kind of has a shot. I don't think or consider myself to be the best evaluation of talent. So, of course, I asked our recruiting team what they thought of Danny O'Neal. They like him. Good motion, good mechanics. Accuracy is an issue, and he throws a lot of interceptions. I think he's the type of player that Sean Lewis can actually manage, though. He's kind of a dual threat. Ran for 1,300 yards in high school. If he can kind of like play within the system, I think he could be pretty good. I think he has upside that AJ Duffy doesn't have. Will he start week 1? Probably not. But he is somebody that I think I'm going to target if he does step in, because I think he's got a little bit of that dual threat upside. We were talking in our CFF chat the other day as well about what position to target in the San Diego State passing room. And I we all came to the same conclusion, essentially, that you really want the outside guy here. And the outside guy in the outside receiver in the Sean Lewis offense has been the wide receiver one by a good amount, going back to this time like Bowling Green, almost every single year, like without fail. So I mean, I think you need to target outside receivers on this team. And O'Neal's got a pretty good arm. Like, I wouldn't call it crazy, but it's good enough. So I think it hit some deep shots too if we see him in. I would say AJ Duffy's probably 80%, 90% to be the starter. I just wouldn't totally assume that he's the guy for the whole season. How about that?
It speaks to it, right? That we're looking at this depth chart, and atop the quarterback depth chart is AJ Duffy or Danny O'Neal. Like, I think that says a lot that, and the beat writers have said the same, that Duffy and O'Neal are far and away from the rest of the quarterback room, and it's not even close. Like, they're clearly the top two guys. So the fact that, like, O'Neal as a true freshman is even challenging AJ Duffy. Now, granted, it's not like Duffy has like a ton of experience or anything like that, right? But
is that an indictment of Duffy or a endorsement of O'Neal? Because I think it's probably the prior. More than it is. Well,
it's most likely the truth somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
But so we talk about the quarterback room here, Mox, but the position that we know for a fact we want in a Sean Lewis system is these wide receivers, right? Like, Sean Lewis's wide receivers have just been uber productive the last couple of years. We're talking about averaging 18.3 fantasy points per game over the last 5 years. Like, you have no idea how hard it is to keep up. Like, people might say, like, okay, 18.3 fantasy points per game. That doesn't sound super crazy because, like, your top end wide receivers are 20 point something. To consistently have that over 5 years is a testament to the offensive system, because 18.3 might not sound great, but that's eighth best. Excuse me. I don't know why I tripped up so much on that. 8th best in the country among all FBS head coaches the last 5 years. So let's look at these wide receivers, Moxley. You mentioned before, we want that outside guy, but looking at this depth chart here, there's 3 names, in my opinion, that really kind of stand out here. Mekhi Shaw, the returning, or the top returning producer for San Diego State last year, 41 targets, 27 receptions, 375 yards, 2 touchdowns. So not great, but that's just what San Diego State's offense was last year. And then 2 transfers here. Nate Bennett out of Sacramento State, who I personally like, but also Lewis Brown IV, the former Colorado State wide receiver, who just transferred in this year. What do you think about that, Mox? Because I've seen, I have the ADPs here. Lewis Brown IV is going in round 28. Both Bennett and Shaw are going undrafted. Who's the guy to target among these 3 guys?
I think it's Bennett. I mean, he's big. He's athletic. He's an outside wide receiver. Was really productive at Portland State. I think even though he's a transfer, he's the guy that I want. He was really good last year. I thought the games that I watched at Portland State, which probably too many. Shaw is a returning option, but I've never really thought too highly of him. He's just like a guy that's there. I don't know. I tend to really like Nate Bennett. And Lewis Brown, I think, is being drafted there because he's a known name, not necessarily because I think he's the most talented receiver in that room. That's kind of my theory on him. Like, everyone knows who he is. He had a lot of hype last offseason. And so I think he's just almost more familiar. Like, not a lot of people know who Nate Bennett is or did before he enrolled in San Diego State. So I think he's being discounted because of that. But he fits this role, like 6'3", 200. Like, that is the Sean Lewis wide receiver that's been so productive. Like, that was who Tez Walker was, right? Like, I don't know. He's the guy that I'm drafting out of all of them.
Yeah, I think you're underestimating Brown just a little bit here. I do like Bennett, as I mentioned kind of before, right? Like, he had a ton of praise early on in the spring, but as the spring kind of went on, Brown was the one I was kind of seeing get more and more praise, and he was the one that, again, I talk about, like, you get that steady drum beat, and then you kind of confirm it with the spring game, right? Brown was the one who stood out during the spring game. Brown led all of the team with 5 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown in that game. A lot of beat writers were talking about his connection with Duffy. I personally think that he's the one to target here, but I wouldn't say it's like clear far and away. And Mekhi Shaw, like again, looking at the step chart, I think it is notable that he's alone at the top of the wide receiver outside position depth chart, right? Because like Nate Bennett, Lewis Brown, they have that or next to them between the two of those, but Shaw is all there by himself. So the fact that he's already got one of those top 2 spots kind of locked down, I do think kind of says something about him.
So 2 things on that. One is, in my mind, that's veteran deference, saying, hey, like, you've been here, you stuck it out. Here, you're the top receiver. The other thing, and I don't know this for sure, but I wonder if an intern was the one who put this depth chart together. just do we think Sean Lewis was the one who put it together? It doesn't really feel like something Sean Lewis would do. I think he might be a little more sneaky about it, but
I can see it.
I'm totally just guessing, right? Like, I'm just saying, what if? The one thing I will say about this team real quick is, yes, there's a lot of turnover. Yes, it's a new system. Yes, it's year 1, but there's a lot of players that are familiar with Sean Lewis on this roster. Like they're on offense, especially like Marquez Cooper, been with Sean Lewis before. Deshaun Poke, I think it's Poke.
Yep. Deshaun Poke.
Yeah. He's been with Sean Lewis before at Kent State. Like, these are players who are familiar with him. So I do think there's there's enough there and familiarity there that I think the learning curve is going to be lower for the entire roster.
I can definitely see that. I will push back on your veteran deference theory just slightly, Mox, because again, this is another interesting point about this depth chart here. At running back, Keenan Kristen, the top returning running back from San Diego State last year, is a top, but he does have that or next to him with Marquez Cooper right there below him. And so
Sean Lewis loves Marquez Cooper, though.
Oh yeah.
Like that, he's like Marcus Cooper Lewis. The way that he was riding him at Kent State, given he's like 180 pounds. So both those backs are small, though.
Oh yeah.
For what I don't think it's going to matter, but like, they are kind of very similar players in terms of size and what they do. Now Christian is 5'10", 190, and Marcus Cooper is like 5'6", 184, based on the most updates weights we have. So
according to the step chart, he's 5'8", 185.
He's not 5'8".
He is not 5'8".
He's not. That is really generous. He's like 5'6". And listen, I as a fellow 5'8" guy, like, know your lane, Marquez.
No, for sure. I am a little worried about Marquez Cooper's value right now, though, because again, he's going as RB35 in drafts, like 8th round. Like
he's going higher than that right now. I mean, I was just in a draft, and I think he went in the first 4 rounds.
Holy crap! I can't do that. I can't do that again. Like, because I mentioned this when he first transferred there. Like, I totally get it. This is like it was the best case scenario in terms of where he could transfer. But San Diego State brings a lot back at running back. Like, Sean Lewis was able to hold on to guys like Keenan Kristen, Jalen Armstead, Cam Davis, Lucky Sutton. Like, these are all guys that could have transferred out if they wanted to. And so I doubt they stick around if they really thought that it was just going to be a 1 or 2 guy show there. And so I'm a little worried about Marquez Cooper. I'll kind of end it off with that.
I think that's fair. All
right, I'll go ahead and move on to our next team here. That way we don't go too long here. I want to talk about Sam Houston. This is a team that I've kind of been doing a little bit more research on recently. I'm a huge fan of Noah Smith. I've been taking him a lot in drafts. He's currently going as wide receiver 14 in drafts, 4th round. So, CFF players highly familiar with what he was able to do last year. Just an absolute barn burner to end the season. But I wanted to kind of take a look at the rest of this team, right? Similar to Alec Iomenor, I started to kind of get this feeling of how much of it was that Noah Smith was just that good and they wanted to rely on him versus how much was it they had to rely on him. And I will not lie, the more I look into this team, the more I realize, like, there's an opportunity for this team to have a big jump this year. Because, again, last year you're talking about 18.6 offensive points per game, so 111th in the country. The offense could be a lot better this year because they just get so many people back. This team was so banged up last year. Like, Mox, of all the people who recorded rushing stats for the Bearcats last year, how many of them do you think played in all 12 games?
Maybe like one, if that.
One. And do you know who that was?
I want to say Gentry, but it's probably not Gentry, right?
Noah Smith.
Well.
And you know, of all the players who recorded receiving stats for the Bearcats last year, how many of them played in all 12 games?
One. Was it Noah Smith?
And it was Noah Smith. So again, they're getting a ton back. And this is also kind of an anti-John Gentry move at this point. I'll admit, I drafted John Gentry quite a bit, but man, they get back Zach Herbcheck this year. I did not pronounce that correctly, but I don't think I'm going to find out how to pronounce that correctly. He was their starting running back last year to start the season. Now, he wasn't super great, but they are getting him back. They also bring in Javon Ducker, who was great in the MAC before he transferred to Memphis. Obviously, he didn't do much there, but he's another serviceable back. And if you listen to the G5 Hive interview with Ben Sorrells recently, by the way, fantastic interview. Absolutely, everybody should go check that out. He basically just said, like, they're going to go committee again this year. They had to rely on Gentry because he was the only healthy back they had at times last year. And for Noah Smith, I'm worried about him going as high as he is because there's other legit wide receiver talent coming back for the Bearcats this year. Ife Adie, I'm not super sold on him. They get Malik Phillips back as well, but the name I'm most interested in, again, this comes from that interview with Ben Sorrells, is Quavez Humphreys. This was the guy that people were expecting to be the wide receiver one for the Bearcats last year before he broke his foot. To me, if you get all of these guys back for the Bearcats and you just get them healthier, right, that's going to be an improvement for the offense. In addition, the Bearcats are going to get better quarterback play in one way, shape, or form this year, right? It was absolutely atrocious what they had to deal with last year, but now they bring in Jace Bauer from Central Michigan, which I'm not going to pretend like Bauer is the most consistent guy in the world, right? We saw the highs and lows there at Central Michigan, but the highs were quite high. But even if he doesn't win this job, Hunter Watson is a guy that he's a transfer coming into this program as well, that the staff seems very high on as well. So if Bauer kind of keeps that inconsistency up, I wouldn't be surprised if Watson gets his shot. And then, like I said, one way or another, the quarterback play will improve. So many things could improve this offense this year. And while Noah Smith may not quite get to what he did last year, because they'll have other options, maybe he's not even a number one guy, but there's value, in my opinion, in a guy like Quavez Humphrey going this late, and the potential for both him and Smith to be CFF options. And then, again, looking at Jace Bauer, QB 61 in drafts, middle of the 25th round, Hunter Watson, undrafted, like, Mox, I know you're a big fan of Bauer. Like, is he going too late? And what do you think about the possibility of Quavez Humphreys?
Yeah, I like Bauer. The 2023 team was so much better down the stretch. And I think the first, like, 3 or 4 games really got a bad taste in people's mouth. Like, the last 6 games, they averaged almost 30 points per game. Like 27, 34, 24, 42, 23, 23. Like, that'll play for a productive offense. It's just that they're really bad. Like the first 5 weeks or the first 6 weeks were they averaged like 11 points or something like that. They started 0-3-7, 28. Okay, congratulations. You scored 28 on Jacksonville State, still lost. And then 16 and 13 against Liberty and New Mexico State. Like the start of the season was terrible. And quarterback play, Shoemaker played better down the stretch too. But they really played. It was really a tale of 2 seasons for Sam Houston. And I think we're going to see more of second half Sam Houston than we did first half Sam Houston. I think Bauer is the best quarterback that will take a snap this year or last year. And he's dual threat upside. So like this is the type of player that I want to be targeting in a conference who I don't like. Their love competition isn't super good. Like the offense was generally speaking, terrible last year on a per play basis, but we saw what it could be, I think, or at least close to what it could be. I don't think they're going to score 30 points, but I do think they could be scoring 26, 27. Like, is that out of their own possibility? I don't think so. They only scored 19 last year.
No, I was saying, yeah, they average 18.6 on the year, and I just looked it up on teamrankings.com. Their last 3 games of the season, they were averaging 25 points. Like, now, I'm not sure what the defensive makeup of some of those teams were. I'd have to look that up later, so maybe that kind of plays into it a little bit. But regardless, right, that's a full touchdown on average increase per game that you were seeing down the stretch. If they can just keep that going into this year, that's a much more productive offense than what we were looking at. Yeah, like if they average at 25, they would jump from 111th in offensive points per game to, good God, 63rd. That's 50 spots up.
I don't think that jump is crazy. I'm not sure I would be that aggressive now that I'm realizing where that fits in the terms of the offense, but I do think they're going to take a step forward for sure. It's important to note that like the last 6 games that I talked about, those are conference games. Like they're still in the same conference. They ain't going nowhere. So
yeah,
I just okay, they're out of conference last year was tough for a team like Sam Houston. I mean, they played BYU, Air Force, and Houston. Like, that's not super easy. But once you got in conference, like they were cooking a little bit. So I don't know. I think that we saw really bad play from them at the beginning of the year, and I think it really left a bad taste in people's mouth. And I think if we look at the last half of the season, it could give us a window into what it could be. And this team plays actually like at a pretty quick pace too. So I think I think there's going to be points to be had. I will say on the receivers, and I think you did a good job. Kind of, I'm in the same boat. The interview that G5 Hive did, like Quavis Humphreys moved into my rankings. I actually ranked it right now, and I will probably move him up. He is wide receiver 84 and a 252nd player overall. Like
yeah,
that's a dude that's good. That's a dude that's getting drafted.
Yeah, I'm definitely adding him to my rankings as well. Again, the Ben Sorrells, who does a fantastic job covering Sam Houston, was very, very adamant about like Humphreys is the guy to watch this year. Like Noah Smith's good, but like there were great things expected of Humphreys last year. And if you want your late round target right now, that's the guy probably to go after.
Yeah, for sure. I still like Noah Smith. I still think he's a dynamic receiver. So I don't want to
for sure
say that he's not the guy. It definitely won't be the guy, but I think his ADP has to come down from where it is. They won't meet in the middle, and I don't think they should, but Noah Smith can't be going in the top 5 rounds anymore, just based on expectation. He needs to go further.
I am moving him down. I think it's fair. Like I had Noah Smith before at wide receiver 10. I think it's fair for me to kind of knock him down into the wide receiver. Good Lord, I might even drop him a little bit more than that. Wide receiver 26 range.
I mean, I don't think it's crazy. And we're basing all of this off a single interview, but like someone who's very much in the know and was very adamant about his thoughts. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
somebody I put a lot of faith into.
I agree, because it's like why bring up a guy like Quavez Humphreys? It's not like it helps his case that we didn't see any of Humphreys last year, so it's not like we're looking at a guy that we know can't produce. This was the guy people were expecting to be the number 1 guy last year, and now he's coming back, and people are saying, well, he might be the number 1 guy again, despite the fact that Noah Smith was that good. Mox, next team we got up here is the UTEP Miners here. This is, again, a team that you really wanted to discuss here. Very interesting team here. We got the head coach from Austin P, Scotty Waldman, coming up here. He kind of comes in, and the offense that we're looking at here is a pretty decent mix of guys that he inherited, but also a bunch of guys he brought over from Austin P as well. So why don't you break down the UTEP Miners here and why you think they're being highly underrated in drafts right now?
Yeah, so I was mocked and ridiculed on Campus Canton Live on Wednesday, a show that I could unfortunately not attend to defend myself, but I wanted to talk about UTEP on that show, and I was laughed at by Austin Nace because, oh, why are we going to talk UTEP? Of course he put UTEP on the show. Whatever, dude. Here's why I'm in on UTEP. Scotty Walden comes in from Austin P. His offense is a marriage of tempo, spread. He calls it the Mike Leach, Rich Rod principles. That's a really interesting offense. They would rank 17th if we looked at plays per minute at what they did at Austin P. So we already know this is a fast-paced offense. They averaged 34 points per game last year, which was 9th in the FCS, 15th in total offense. A sneaky little stat that I don't think is going to get a lot of buzz, but is important, is they were one of the best special teams in the country. They were first in return yards. And that gives the offense a better starting field position and makes that increases points scored on the margins. Yes. But that matters, especially when you're really good at special teams. If you watch, they played really well the last 2 seasons. But the game against Tennessee, they played them really tight for 3 quarters. Tennessee is Tennessee. So obviously they waxed them in the 4th, but that was a close game in the second half. And the score does not indicate that, but it was. I think there's a lot to like about what he did the last 2 years, especially at Austin Peay, right? He was there for 4. First 2 were kind of rocky, and then he kind of got his system going. Who am I targeting on this team? I think Javon Jackson is the number 1 guy. He rushed for 1,400 yards last year, 10 touchdowns, 20 carries, or 20 catches too. His 71% backfield dominator was top 10, or would have been top 10. Just a dude base offense. 250, or he had 11 receptions. I'm sorry. 252 carries. The next closest running back last year, 29. Waldens are not really interested in splitting carries all that much. The quarterback was rushing a lot in that offense, so maybe we'll see more backs get involved just because they want to rush with somebody else. I don't think that's Cade McConnell. I don't think Cade McConnell's the best rusher out there. I think he's can move a little, but I wouldn't call him a true dual threat. They also bring in Skylar Locklear. I don't think he's going to start. He was the backup at Austin Peay last year. 2 really good wide receivers, in my opinion. Trey Goodman, who comes again from Austin Peay. He averaged over 21 yards per reception last year. He's just an explosive wide receiver on the outside, but doesn't really command a big target share. He had 34 receptions the last 2 years each. I don't know that he's going to dominate in that role. The guy that I think I may prefer is Jaden Smith. He's a transfer in from Eastern Kentucky. And it's funny, I think he was targeted because Austin played Eastern Kentucky last year, and he went for 11 for 130 on them.
Oh my God.
And I wonder if Scotty Walden was okay, maybe we need to bring him in. He's a pretty good player, I think. And so I like him to lead the offense, but I think those top 2 receivers are going to be pretty good.
And
I love UTEP this year. And if it's not this year, it's going to be next year. This offense is going to be good.
No, I could totally buy in. And in addition to Trey Goodman, right, he brings in some other wide receivers from Austin Peay, Kenny Odom, Cam Thomas, a couple of guys there. Yeah, I'm pretty interested in UTEP this year. I've been drafting Javon Jackson. Actually, I went back and looked at the ADP for Javon Jackson, and I was looking at the individual drafts. If he didn't go undrafted, more than likely, if he was drafted, it was either me or Volume Pigs. He's one, or no, actually no. Let me rephrase this. Javon Jackson. If people ask me all the time, what are some big differences you notice in expert drafts versus drafts where it's a bit more casual experience? Javon Jackson is easily, in my opinion, one of the guys that has some of the biggest ADP discrepancies between those type of drafts. Experts are in on Javon Jackson this year at UTEP. They're fully with you in him being a big part of this UTEP offense. Again, everybody's still trying to figure out exactly what Cade McConnell and the wide receivers will look like. Because again, I went back and looked at Walden's history. It's a solid enough passing attack, right? And the high pace makes sense, but he does spread the ball around quite a bit. So it's a little hard to really believe that there's going to be a top end dominant guy here. But another thing that's going in UTEP's favor, again, looking at our CFF guide here, looking at the top 20 easiest group of 5 schedules, UTEP's number 18. Looking at this schedule, again, there's a couple of tough games here at Nebraska, at Tennessee, but everything in between those, Southern Utah, Liberty, Colorado State, Sam Houston, Western Kentucky, Florida International, Louisiana Tech, Middle Tennessee, Kennesaw State, and they end the season with New Mexico State. If this offense actually does get up and running in year 1, big if, but if they do get up and running in year 1, I don't see a game outside of Nebraska or Tennessee where you're kind of hesitating to play those guys.
Yeah, I think the offense is primed to succeed early too. I think they could get out to a nice start after that Nebraska game with Southern Utah week 2. I know Liberty's week 3, but like Colorado State, Sam Houston, like we said, like I could dig it for sure. It's just a team who I just think the whole entire roster is going too late in drafts. Like I drafted and I will rank Javon Jackson in the top 15 rounds of college fantasy drafts. Like I think that's where he should be going. I just think he's that good. And primed, like he doesn't split touches. Like he has the minor back position, which like they generally line up 2 backs. Like the minor back is a totally different like role in the offense. Right? That's what Cam Thomas plays. And Cam Thomas is probably going to get like 40, 50 catches. But he's not good. Like he's not really interfering with the rushing work all that much. It's like Javon Jackson isn't going to have 20, 30 catches, but he's probably going to have 10, 15. Like that's like on the margins, that sort of thing matters. So is he going to run for 1,400 yards? No, he's not. The offensive line doesn't return any starters. They're bringing 2 transfers. I don't know how good it's going to be. That's my biggest concern on in general. They bring in two starters from Austin P that I think will anchor both tackle spots, if I remember correctly. But that's the one thing holding them back. And it's not like the conference in general has really good defensive line play. So I don't know. UTEP is a team I just find myself drafting a lot of.
Sounds good. We'll go ahead and move on to my next team here. I really want to talk about the East Carolina Pirates here. This is a team that, again, we've had some great CFF history here. Obviously, some names that come to mind. Obviously, Keaton Mitchell a couple years ago was absolutely fantastic. Holton Ahlers was a guy that people were drafting year after year when he was the starter. Things definitely kind of fell apart for the most part last year with the East Carolina Pirates, finishing with a record of 2-10. The offense was just absolutely horrendous at times. None of the quarterbacks were really working out there. So Mike Houston had to make a change here with this offense. And so he goes and grabs a Lane Kiffin disciple here in John David Baker, bringing him over from Ole Miss to run a very similar type of system here. And quite frankly, this is one of those systems where I like what they've done this offseason. I think they can get off the ground pretty early on, given the fact they have a nice mix of some Power 4 players coming down and potentially being able to start and dominate at this lower G5 level, as well as some returning big-time players that should help them kind of keep things going here, right? So, again, we'll start with the quarterbacks here, right? Regardless of who wins this job between Katon Hauser and Jake Garcia, I do have Katon Hauser currently winning the job. Again, he's probably gotten the most consistent praise out of spring, and given the fact that he's the younger out of the two, I think when you have typically when coaches have 2 guys that are relatively even with one another, they do tend to go with the younger guy because, then the upside's there. So I think Katon Hauser will end up winning this job. I'm praying that he runs a lot more than he did at Michigan State or in high school, because that'll definitely up his CFF potential there. But regardless, it'll be a much better passing system than what East Carolina's had the last couple of years. So that'll be a big improvement for this offense. At running back, things are quite interesting. Again, all the guys are going undrafted. Rajay Harris isn't going undrafted. Javis Bond is going undrafted. Marlon Gunn's going undrafted. And I get it, right? It's fully expected that this will be a committee for the most part. But I would say keep an eye on Javis Bond. He overtook Marlon Gunn last year. Marlon Gunn was a guy that we had in our C2C freshman supplemental guide the year that he was a true freshman. And then the very next year, Javis Bond comes in and overtakes him as a younger back. He led the team in yards per carry at 5.4, also led the team in targets among running backs. If there's going to be a guy here that kind of breaks out and is like the true do-it-all back for this offense, it's probably going to be Bond. The big problem is, though, he's very skinny. He's 171 pounds and 5'11". To give you an idea, people thought that Keaton Mitchell was skinny, and he was 5'8", 191. So you're talking about a back that's 3 inches taller and 20 pounds lighter. So big problem there, right?
Dude, eat a freaking cheeseburger.
I know, right?
Like, how are you a FBS football player? You were 5'11", you weigh 171 as a running back. Like as a
running back, as a receiver, I could get it, right? But
like what is the ECU weight room situation? It's not. Listen, Greenville's not far from me. I could be there in probably under 2 hours. So maybe we need some on the ground research. I don't know.
I agree. Hey, go over there. Take Bond out for lunch. But that's quarterback and the running back situation. The wide receiver situation, in my opinion, is the most interesting here, right? Chase Sewell comes back. He's the lead returning receiver. I liked him early on in the season. He led the team in receiving production, 622 yards and a touchdown as a redshirt freshman. And given the quarterback play that he got, that the fact that he was able to produce that was a minor miracle. He's currently going off in drafts, wide receiver 96, like 310. So you're looking at probably the 25th round there. I think doing math off the top of my head, 26th round. The other option here is Winston Wright Jr., the former West Virginia and former Florida State wide receiver. Didn't really do much at Florida State, but he's come in at East Carolina. It's gotten a ton of praise coming out of the spring. There's been multiple beat writers that said they fully expect him to be the number one option for this offense coming out. Now, I don't know what the number one option for John David Baker's system is going to provide in terms of a CFF production, but it's something that I'm keeping an eye on. This is a year that like this offense has to be better. Like Mike Houston's job is on the line here. You can't go 2-10 and have the same offensive ineptitude that you did last year. We absolutely should expect to see an increase in efficiency here. And as long as they don't spread these targets around too much, I do think guys like Chase Sewell and Winston Wright are going too late. And another sneaky guy to kind of throw out there, a guy that I got mad didn't make it back to me in the G5 draft we're doing right now, Mox, is Casey Kelly, the tight end brought in from Ole Miss, who's worked with John David Baker for years. And so a couple of guys there, I think they're just kind of going too late for the most part. I fully expect to see this offense much better than what we got the last couple of years, especially on the backs of Power 4 players like Caden Hauser, Winston Wright Jr., and Casey Kelly, guys that, quite frankly, may not be good at the Power 4 level, but at the G5 level, absolutely could do a lot better. What do you think, Box?
Yeah, no, I think there's upside for this offense. I also project Hauser to start, but not really like super confident. I'm not sure it matters either. I think they're probably similar enough passers where the offense is relatively the same. The one thing I'll say about Winston Wright, though, and I did want to make this note, is he lost the 2022 season because of a car accident. Like he just couldn't play. He was recovering from injury. 2023 is kind of a lost season too for him. He only played in 5 games, only had 4 catches. Like he just it felt like after the car accident, like it just wasn't happening at Florida State. Rehab, everything. Mentally, I'm sure it was very difficult for him. But he was pretty good at West Virginia. So I don't know for sure what we're going to get from him. And him and Sowell are very different players. Sowell's like a big outside guy. Wright's going to operate in the slot. Mm-hmm. But if we have a healthy Wright, like he could be a really dynamic player. I don't think he should go over Sowell because I think there's a lot of questions given his last 2 years. But we saw a good player at West Virginia. And I think that player is probably somewhere still there. So he's draftable to me for sure. It's just how high do you take him? Because I think it's risky, but like he goes as wide receiver like 100 or what it was, whatever. He goes outside the top 300. You're doing just fine taking that risk, you know?
I agree 100%, right? Like in Winston Wright, yeah, wide receiver 105, Chase Sewell 96. I'm irresponsible, Mox. I actually have Wright ahead of Sewell. I do like Sewell quite a bit, but like I
know you do.
It wasn't just one beat writer that was saying this. It was multiple beat writers that were saying that like Wright will probably be the number one guy. And I think you're 100% right. Like a change of scenery can really help a guy like that, especially after something tragic like that. So maybe it was a year too late, but like I'm looking forward to the rebound from Wright.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to think that Florida State is not necessarily indicative of the player he is.
All righty, let's move on to your next team you want to talk about here, Mox. This is one that I know for a fact you've been banging the drum on. Got to talk about the Rice Owls here. By the way, one thing I really want to mention about East Carolina real quick. We mentioned that UTEP was like the 18th easiest schedule in the G5. Something that's going to help out East Carolina quite a bit. There's the number 1 easiest schedule in all of the group of 5, according to our C2C winning edge numbers. So, like, yeah, maybe they have some trouble in the beginning, but, like, as you go down the stretch, like they'll be just fine. They have no Power 4 teams on their schedule. What was that?
And they're favored in my opinion 9 games, but CTC winning edge 8 games. Like team's gonna be good.
So, all right, back to Rice, Mox, and I'll have one little soapbox to stand on here with Rice, and it has nothing to do with CFF, but dadgummit Rice, hire a real photographer. Oh my God, finding pictures of Rice players is like pulling teeth. Every one of their photos is like 300 by 500 pixels, and like I'm looking at look at if you're watching this on YouTube, look at the quality difference between EJ Warner there and freaking Dean Connors. That's the best photo I could find of Dean Connors, and he looks like garbage. Hire a real photographer, Rice. Anyway, off my soapbox. Mox, tell us about the Owls.
ISO's like 1 million. Okay, this is the offense that I probably drafted more of than any team in the country this offseason. They were already good last year. Like they're 57 points per game. They love to throw the ball like a lot. Like Mike Bluegrim ranked 7th in neutral game script pass rate last year. They return 4 offensive line starters and actually add UGA tackle Chad Lindbergh, who played in 12 games last year. He's not like I wouldn't call him like a superstar, but if you play in and start a bunch of SEC games and now you're going to Rice, that's a nice addition to the line. The biggest question that I have is what is EJ Warner right now? Because we could compare him to EJ. Getting all my Daniels mixed up. JT Daniels, yes, who had 8.9 adjusted yards per attempt. Warner had 6.8. That's a pretty significant difference. I don't know that EJ Warner likes to throw the ball downfield all that often. Like I think he'd much rather operate close to the line. So that tells me it's Landon Ransom goals time. I think he's going to slide into the slot receiver vacated by Luke McCaffrey. I don't have as much hope for Roston McNeil because he is like that 6'5" outside wide receiver. And listen, it's not that he doesn't target the outside wide receiver either. The leading wide receiver for Temple last year was an outside wide receiver. It's just he tends to operate closer line of scrimmage compared to someone like JT Daniels did. Like 6.8 adjusted yards per attempt is not very high. Mm-hmm. So that tells me that the offense is probably going to be quick passes. And if the offensive line is good, we might see a little bit more deep passing because it wasn't very good at Temple. So I think there's potentially some more there to unlock and improve the offense just overall. The number one target, though, Dean Connors is a little expensive. He's RB1, no question. Like he's a little pricey. You're not getting a discount on Dean Connors.
I would say quick price check on him. Again, RB34 in drafts, middle to late 7th round.
He's going even higher than that in some drafts too. Like it is getting quite difficult to. Our friend Andrew Katz took him at 5'8" in the most recent draft I'm in with him.
PPR league?
I think so.
Okay, that probably makes a bit more sense.
You're paying 5th round prices for Dean Connors right now. Like you're not getting a discount. Everybody knows who Dean Connors is. But you are getting a discount on, if you're not in a draft with me, is Bowden Grown, tight end. EJ Warner loves the tight end.
Yes.
Loves the tight end position. Last season at Temple, they combined for 141 total targets. That is 30% of all pass attempts. And they had 2 tight ends that were heavily involved. And they still got production out of David Martin Robinson that was really usable. Rice has got one guy who runs routes, and that's Bowden Grown. 89% route participation rate. He only had 17 blocking snaps last year. He's on the field all the time. He's more of a wide receiver than he is running back or tight end in terms of like blocking and where he lines up. He does line up in line, but not a significant amount of time. He's more targets than any of the returning wide receivers. He was their breakout star last year. Tell me why Bowden Grown can't be a top 5 tight end.
Mox, I probably have drafted more Bowden Green than any other tight end because of like you pointed him out early on in the offseason. I'm like, you know what? Like this is exactly what you want in a top end CFF wide tight end option, right? You mentioned he's a top returning target getter for this offense. Yeah, he probably doesn't pass up whoever's playing in that slot position there, but he's a young guy, clearly ready for a good breakout this year, right? Or we already broke out last year, but even bigger role this year, right? Especially with Luke McCaffrey gone. Dean Connors will be kind of that second, really kind of be his main competition, maybe over the middle there or for short routes and everything like that. But so might cap a ceiling just a little bit, but for the most part, like there's nobody else really on that roster that I can fully trust right now.
And the offense ranked 7th in neutral game script. There's going to be enough passes to go around for everybody.
I agree 100%.
That's why I like the whole offense.
No, again, I very much have drafted so much Bowden Green this year. Like it's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, and another G5 Hive shout out. They had, now I'm gonna not remember the name of the site.
I can look it up.
Yeah, I think it's like Owl's Nest or the Roost. I think it might be the Roost.
It is the Roost.
Yeah, which is a really good Rice site, by the way. I get a lot of information from them. He said on the show, Bowden Groen's going to have an amazing season. This guy who covers Rice football full time. What more do you need? He is my most drafted player in all drafts. I have a ton of EJ Warner too. Landon Ransom is how he's listed in Fantrax, but it's Landon Ransom goals. He is getting a little pricey. But I don't.
What drafts? I got him at wide receiver 101 in our ADP. Either I need to add some of your drafts apparently, Mox, to our ADP because he's a huge discount in my opinion right now.
So I have him ranked as wide receiver 75, which like I really like him. Like I think he can easily outperform that too. I'm just like hedging is really where that rank comes in.
Yeah, but I had him higher to start the offseason here.
He just went in round 20 of the most recent draft I'm in. Oh wait, I took him there. I was gonna say something else. Oh gosh, I took Bowden Groen round 16, EJ Warner round 19, and Landon Ransom round 20.
Oh my god!
As you can tell, I practice I at least practice what I preach.
No, for sure.
I also took
Javon
Jackson in this round.
You what?
I also took Javon Jackson in this draft too.
Nice.
So
yeah,
I'm bearing my chest to the world.
I have Landon Ransom goals even higher than you do, Mox. I got him at wide receiver 64.
Maybe we got to move him up.
Maybe I had him higher to start the season because I'm like you mentioned, there's so much vacated production there with Luke McCaffrey going. Like I'm like somebody has to step up. Landon Ransom seemed like the guy, and I'm like I haven't heard much. I guess I move him down a little bit because maybe it is the Connors and Green show over there, but I don't know. Maybe the echo chamber here will help us out.
Yeah, right. I'm on a I got my narrow sights on Rice. So I had not drafted much Ross McNeil or Kobe Campbell either. Listen, I really like the offense. I'm just not sure the offense is going to support like five different options. Yeah. Right? Like I think Dean Connors will get his absolutely. I don't think there's much question about that. Everybody's on Dean Connors. I think a wide receiver is going to emerge, and I think it's going to be the slot, which has been productive for Rice. It was Luke McCaffrey's role. And I like the tight end. I think you have three options that are going to be fantasy relevant here. And so I think the slot receiver is the one that I'm targeting of all the receivers. Like Ross McNeil's a good player too. Like he's 6'5", big boundary guy. Like he can make plays downfield. It's just I don't know that really fits what EJ Warner wants to do as much.
Yeah, totally get it. All right, let's keep it moving here before we get too long of a show here. We got two more teams to get through here. I want to talk about New Mexico. We talk about again, shout out Mitch Hart here. We talk about the big fish, small pond deal in college fantasy, right? When you got power four players going down to the G5 level, right? And a lot of times those guys will, stand out because they're just guys that probably shouldn't be playing at that level for one reason or another. They are. And again, recruits go the same way. Does the same thing happen with coaches? Is my kind of question here with New Mexico, because Bronco Mendenhall, in my opinion, is a power 4 level head coach. He was phenomenal at Virginia for years. And now he's headed to New Mexico, playing in the Mountain West. This is an offense that, if he's able to get it going this year, could absolutely dice up a Mountain West schedule. And it'll be such a nice change of pace for New Mexico, considering what the offensive ineptitude they've had over the past couple of years. He brings with him Jason Beck, who is Robert Anae's former protege at Syracuse, and before that at Virginia with Bronco Mendenhall. So obviously there's a history there. Beck knows the kind of system that Mendenhall wants to do. Beck didn't have a great season last year at Syracuse. So like when you look at the numbers in our guide, right, like it's not super pretty considering that, they were 108th in offensive points per game. But also when you look back at what Syracuse had to deal with last year and the quarterback injury situation, the fact that they were starting a tight end at quarterback over Carlos Del Rio Wilson tells you everything you need to know about what that team was dealing with. They should be a lot better here, especially if Devin Dampier is able to take that year 2 step. He was, I'm not going to say incredible down the stretch for New Mexico, but clearly he was a bit more of an offensive spark. He's a dual threat guy, which is exactly what you want to see under Bronco Mendenhall in this system. He's currently going undrafted in a ton of leagues right now, and if you do see him go, he's probably going in the last 5 rounds of your draft. He's got a great ceiling there if this actually is able to get going here. Another name that I'm kind of interested in is the top returning wide receiver here in Caleb Medford. Again, he had 68 targets, 30 receptions, 551 yards, 2 touchdowns last year, which when you break it down, that's 18.4 yards per reception. Given just the absolute ineptitude we saw in offense, that's a borderline miracle that he was able to produce that much. And so when you get like a real offensive system there with Bronco Mendenhall, I'm kind of excited to see what Caleb Medford could possibly do when he gets that pretty much locked in 100 targets, 90 to 100 targets that Bronco Mendenhall gives his top receiver. Now, again, that's not the biggest jump in the world. Like you're talking about an additional 22 to 32 targets, but more than enough, in my opinion, to potentially get him to be a you're not a top end CFF option, but a usable CFF option in the Mountain West there, especially if he's able to bring in more than half of his targets, unlike what he was able to do last year. So I'm excited to see what he does. The fun thing about Bronco Mendenhall is he is very creative in the way that he uses different guys, right? So like I wasn't big on guys like Eli Sanders and Andrew Henry to start the offseason because, again, running backs typically don't do super well with Bronco Mendenhall's system, but who's to say that he doesn't use them as basically big inside wide receivers? Like you don't run the ball a ton, but if they're good catching the ball, they could be pretty interesting. Trace Buckler comes in as the top tight end. I'm not going to sit here and pretend outside of Devin Dampier or Medford being able to tell you who exactly I think you should draft. I do think it's interesting that Eli Sanders, of all these guys, is the only one in our ADP right now. Now, it's like the last round. Like it's running back 124, 30.05 is his average. But regardless, like I'm surprised more people aren't taking shots on a system that, again, if it's able to get going in year 1, should be pretty fun. The main problem is pretty tough schedule for a G5 program. 2 of their first 3 weeks are Arizona and Auburn. And again, it's a little bit better from there on out, but they do kind of finish. They have Washington State there to finish the season. Not going to pretend like Washington State's a world beater, but it's a pretty tough team to have right there near the end. So, Mox, what do you think about New Mexico? Are you expecting Mendenhall to get things going in year 1? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the schedule, like you said, is there a game that they're really favored on the schedule? I don't think there is. I mean, they play Montana State. I think Montana State's a better team than them. I'm looking for the game that I think they can. I think they could beat Colorado State, maybe. I think they could beat San Diego State, maybe. Hawaii, I could see it, but like it's a really tough schedule. But
all I'm hearing is a lot of negative game script that forces them to pass.
As you read my mind. Yeah, I think that's the path forward. And the last time we saw Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia, he had a top 5 offense with Brendan Armstrong. Like, yeah, he had Robert Anae, but Robert Anae was more like his lieutenant than he was like the mastermind. Like Robert Anae is really smart and really good at what he does too. But like Bronco Mendenhall is Bronco Mendenhall. Like he will produce good offenses. I don't know. I'm a little concerned about year 1 here because there is so much turn. They rank 130th in offensive turning production. Like there's no familiarity with this offense. Really,
now, granted, how much of that is from one player? With Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt leaving. I
mean, they don't bring back any offensive line starters.
Okay, that's fair.
The only real starter that they have from last year is Caleb Medford. on offense at least. The defense is in a little bit better shape, but still, like 26% of returning production is really bad. So that just concerned me. A total lack of familiarity with the program, and like they brought in 8, I think, offensive line transfers, maybe 9. Like that tells me that unit is in big trouble. So that kind of hurts Dampierre's upside too, because he's a rusher. So like those negative plays on sacks are going to hurt him. But at the end of the day, if you had to distill it down to one thing, the answer is Bronco Mendenhall, just like working magic. Like that's it. And so I can buy that story. Like I can say, okay, yeah, like I don't like what they did last year. I don't like the way the team looks. They have a ton of turnover. I don't know it's going to work. But Bronco Mendenhall really always gets the best out of his teams. So if it doesn't work this year, I think it will probably work long term. If he wants to coach, I don't think he's staying in New Mexico for a long time. Like he'll get a better job.
That blew me away when New Mexico was able to pull in Bronco Mendenhall, because I guarantee there's a lot of Power 4 programs that were like kicking themselves when they saw New Mexico hire him, because they're like, if they had known that Mendenhall was like an option to be hired, right? Like they probably would have pulled that trigger.
It was really weird when he was going to get fired at Virginia, right? Which he fired Bronco Mendenhall, replaced him with Tony Elliott. Congratulations, you played yourself. But he was pretty straightforward with it too. He said, "Yeah, I'm stepping down, but I'm not retiring from coaching. Like I still want to coach." And so he took a year off. He took a year off, right? He wasn't on anybody's staff.
No, he wasn't on anybody's staff last year.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was an analyst or something. I didn't think so. He gets to mold his team how he wants it.
This is a team with zero expectations too. So like,
it is a team with zero expectations. They won what, 4 games last year, and they have not been particularly competitive most seasons. So yeah,
the fact is that they won 4 games last year, and that was like a borderline miracle for them. So
yeah, they really haven't had a good team since like 2016. So it's been a long time.
Alrighty, Mox, we got one more team to discuss here. You brought up Coastal Carolina, and I'm not gonna lie. As soon as you brought this team up, I did a little research, and there's a couple players on this team that I should add to my rankings. And so I'll let you kind of take it away from here. The only thing I'll say is the only player in our ADP from this team consistently getting drafted is quarterback Ethan Vasco at QB 55, mid to late 23rd round there. Again, pretty much, I say mid to late 23rd round. He doesn't go there every draft. It's going to be a pretty big range once you get down that late. But Mox, what's there to be excited here? Because I'm even more curious, Mox, because you did not like this offense, or you did not like this head coach hire last year, or this offensive coordinator hire. What's kind of changing your tune a little bit here and making you think this is an underrated offense?
So I don't know if I dislike the offensive coordinator hire. I know I dislike the head coach. Like I did not like what Tim Beck did at North Carolina State at all. And he's made some questionable decisions, maybe off the football field, including going shirtless at the bowl game last year. But besides that, I'm buying the second year bounce from this team. And it's because of their offensive coordinator, Travis Trickett. If you remember 2022 South Florida, it was the year that Jeff Scott got fired. Like that team was horrible. They went 1-11. They had Jerry Bohannon. They had Katrice Marsh at quarterback. And they still scored a ton of points. They played great offensive football. Their defense was terrible. They played great offensive football. I think Trickett can get the same out of this team. I really do. And Vasco is the type of quarterback that I think he can do it with. He's got size. He's got an arm. He's a dual threat. I think he's extremely underrated currently. And last year was kind of like a lost year for this program. It was not only the year one of a new coach, year one of a new system. Like going from what Jamie Chadwell ran to what Travis Trickett likes to run is also very different. So I wasn't surprised he struggled last year. You also had Grayson McCall, who played like 6 games or 7 games, however many it was before he got hurt. Then you had Vasco come in, who probably wasn't expecting to start, given that McCall was like the guy. And so, yeah, he was thrown into the fire a little bit. And I thought he played pretty well for the most part. Like down the stretch, he had some really good games. So I like Ethan Vasco a lot. And they seem to really like him too. Like the way that Coastal Carolina talks about him is like he's the next coming. They just had Grayson McCall. So the way that they speak about Vasco is pretty surprising to me.
Well, I'll add in a little note here. Again, we'll keep praising the G5 Hive for their great work. Again, the beat writer they brought in for Coastal Carolina, Mox, I don't know if you heard this part. He compared Vasco and Grayson McCall to Jackson Arnold and Dylan Gabriel. Like that, he basically was saying that Vasco is so good that he basically almost forced out. They kind of kindly pushed Grayson McCall out, which I'm like, I don't know if I fully buy that, but like if it's true, that's huge.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm there. This seems like a stretch, considering Grayson McCall, but like he kept getting hurt. Like he couldn't really rely on him. And like that injury last year was kind of like a freak injury, so I don't want to like say he's injury prone, but still like it was kind of piling up a little bit. I don't know. I like Vasco a lot. I think he brings a lot with his legs too. I don't really have a strong feel for the running back position, although I have drafted a lot of Braden Bennett, but mostly because I just like the player. I think he's like a good player overall. So like if I'm going to add players that I think are on productive offenses and like the running back, and I think that they're going to score more points, he's a good target. But Jameson Tucker is definitely the guy that I'm targeting here outside of Vasco. I think he could have a really big year. He's a bigger guy, 6'2", 190. Played a lot last year too, like 70% of snaps. So he's got experience in this offense. I think he could take a big step. I really do. Also like the tight end Kendall Carr, by the way. I know you have NA listed, but just saying.
You know what? I should have dug deeper on the tight end. But this is also the last team, so you got to give you some credit, Mox. I've researched.
That's true. You did put together all the graphics, and I did not help out with that at all. So I appreciate it.
No, you're good. I'm not knocking on you for that. No, but Jameson Tucker is like we're talking about the player that I need to add to my rankings. Tucker's the guy. This is a big miss on my part. Because St. Pinckney last year, right? 101 targets on the season. So this is clearly an offense that's okay with getting their top guys a lot of targets. Jared Brown got 81 targets. Both of them are gone. That's a ton. I mean, a ton of vacated production there. And Tucker's clearly the next guy up there. And even still, Tucker, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, Mox. He had 20.8 yards per reception last year among 19 receptions. That's a pretty crazy efficiency there. Now, I'm not going to pretend like he keeps that up into next year. I mean, that was my argument against Trey Harris, right? Trey Harris was getting like 25 yards per catch to start last year, and that he dropped down to like 15 by the end of the year. But regardless, like having 20.8 over an entire season is pretty impressive regardless. And if he can get, basically, like if he somehow kept that same efficiency and went from 30 targets to 101 targets, you're looking at a 1,500-yard receiver. Yards. What'd you say?
I was going to say he's going to have 1,000,000 yards.
You're looking at 1,500 yards in receiving. And so the upside there is absolutely incredible, right? And they don't really have anybody else that I'm like super loving. I mean, Kyrie Duplessis is an interesting guy.
Kyrie who?
Kyrie Duplessis.
Sorry.
Duplessis. Am I pronouncing that incorrectly, or is it just funny?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
But like DeAndre Coleman's another guy that I know we like that, like recruiting wise and everything. He's expected to potentially kind of get into the starting rotation as well. But like Tucker feels far and away the best receiving option they have this upcoming year. Another thing you probably should have noted about Braden Bennett. Braden Bennett's another good receiving option for this team. So like again, you're talking about a guy that just gets, maybe he doesn't get 200 carries, but if he can get 150 plus 30 catches, I think that'd be pretty solid running back pick there as well. So Tucker's a guy I have to add to my rankings.
I think Tucker's he's a really good athlete for his size. Like he runs a 4.5, somewhere in the 4.5s. He's got a 40-inch vertical. He was a 3-sport athlete. He ran track. He played basketball. Played football. Like he's a good athlete. And so I think he can out-athlete a lot of dudes in this conference too. I mean, the argument against him is essentially Ethan Vasco stinks and he can't throw the ball. Like that's the argument against Jameson Tucker. Maybe that's true, right? We haven't seen enough of Vasco to say he for sure has it, but like I'm willing to bet he does. And if that's true, we know this offense funnels targets to the wide receiver one, and that is Tucker. And he's sliding into a role that has been productive in the past.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. With that, Mox, we are pretty much at the end of our show. Before we get out of here, Mox, again, we talked a lot at the beginning of the show regarding some exciting stuff Campus to Canton is doing, but do you have anything that you want to throw out there that you want to kind of pump up a little bit?
No, if you haven't already, just download the CFF guide, check it out. I think it's our best version yet. This is our third year doing it, and I think the improvements that have been made each year for like the entire team works incredibly hard on it. It's a really great product. And you know that I feel like I'm kind of relaxing after that got released.
I am too.
Maybe. So a lot of work was put into that, and I would absolutely recommend checking it out because a lot of these nuggets that we pulled today are from that guide. So
agreed, 100%. Like that was like as I mentioned, kind of in the very intro. Like that's the first place I went to when I was like, okay, it's time to do this show again. It's perfectly timed for when the CFF guide comes out. That's pretty much when we've done it each year. It's like right when we get those team profiles because it's a great way to just kind of go in and start looking at all these different teams and be like, all right, what's a team that I haven't really done enough research on? Oh, New Mexico. Oh, East Carolina. Oh, Coastal Carolina. Like these are teams I hadn't thought about, but maybe there's some nuggets there. Guess what? That's where we found a lot of these guys here. So absolutely go check all of that out. But with everything else out of the way, I want to thank you all for listening. If you have not already, go ahead and leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you're watching this on the YouTube side of things, if you're on the podcast side of things, make sure you follow the show. Leave a 5-star review where you can. Make sure you guys continue to check us out the rest of this month. We are getting ready to, I don't know if we're going to be doing it next week or the week after, but we'll be diving into our yearly crash course videos for each of the different positions. You guys loved them last year, so we are going to bring those back again. We'll have some awesome guests on each week for that in order to really get you fully prepared for when those drafts are coming up. In addition to that, make sure you check out the rest of the Campus to Canton podcast networks for shows ranging on pretty much anything you can think of related to the college fantasy game. Regardless of all that, we'll see you guys back here next Monday. Until then, really appreciate you guys and hope you have a wonderful and blessed week. See y'all.